and cent in your whole stack. Be your own bank, be your own tank. You can't stop blockchain, be store lies. 3D printed doing last like Daytona. Don't attract no cops, no donuts. Counter economics doing all that.
Okay, it's getting real. They want to hold us back. I'm trying to hold my steel.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Crypto Beat, where we bring you all of the latest and greatest in crypto news. And there's a lot of stuff to dive into today. Really delighted to have you all. Don't forget to smash that like button, hit the subscribe button while you are here, and that really does help us get boosted in the YouTube algorithm. Whoa, we got a super chat already. Cypher RK, thank you. It sent a sticker that says, "Hey you," and I am here for it. I'm gonna screenshot that right now. Yeah, really appreciate you for your support and everyone who's tuning in via the chat. So let's talk about what we're going to cover in today's show. A lot of juicy topics. The first one, we're talking about Terra. We're talking about them flipping Ethereum. No, I'm not talking about CoinMarketCap. We'll dive into how they flipped Ethereum in a second. Not quite there yet. Ethereum is still number 2 up there. Then we have got Shake Shack. They're doing a bit of a Bitcoin giveaway. We'll dive into the details there. Iranians banned from OpenSea. Sanctions are really getting heavy across the world, and we'll dive into some other things that have been going on with that. And then our final block, I'm really excited to have special guest Michael Perklin joining us, and we're going to be diving into what's happening with people who are blocked from accessing MetaMask in Venezuela. It caused a huge uproar on Twitter. Everyone is saying, is Ethereum too centralized if people can order sanctions and an entire country can lose access to their MetaMask wallets, for example? So we'll dive into all of those details there. Let's start it off talking about Terra. So Terra Luna. So Luna has flipped Ethereum. They've become the second largest network for staked value. Nice little caveat there. When you hear these headlines in the news and they say like Terra flips Ethereum, and then in small letters it's like it's staked value. There are also some other caveats. Let's dive into what they actually mean by this. So apparently they are now in second place for staked value according to data from Staking Rewards. Oh, just got another super chat. Thank you, IT. Hey yourself. Hey to you. Awesome to have you here. So according to data from Staking Rewards, they have $29.5 billion worth of Luna locked up compared to Ether's $25.9 billion. So a couple of numbers switched there. 29.5 Luna, 25.9 for Ethereum, in case that was confusing. Solana still leads with staking charts at 35 billion in staked value. Now, you may be thinking, this is crazy. I just looked at DeFi Llama's data and it showed that Ethereum towers above all else. So there is a difference between staked value and total value locked metrics. And so these are different metrics that are being calculated there. Yes, the total value locked of Ethereum is $111 billion currently. These figures also incorporate collateral locked across decentralized finance, DeFi protocols, and not just ETH staked on Beacon Chain, which is what Staking Rewards is calculating. So, it's a cool headline, not quite as cool as they flipped Ethereum and all of these other metrics, but it's really awesome to see DeFi just going from strength to strength. It's really not dying down. It's a wonderful tool for freedom that people are exploring because the barriers to entry are just not there that exist in traditional finance. It's also cool to see that apparently Terra Luna is being integrated into Thorchain. Got Rune's upcoming mainnet launch and Terra integration. You saw a giant rally in both of these things. Really cool. If we're talking about freedom of money and individual sovereignty, I mean, Thorchain is really such an amazing focal point that the community is looking at right now, being this cross-chain DEX that will now enable you to just swap between different chains easily without KYC, without having to ask permission first. It's really quite exciting. So let's dive into our next story here. We're talking about Shake Shack. apparently they're giving away Bitcoin. So they've got like Bitcoin rewards. It's kind of interesting. I didn't pick that Shake Shack is going to be just giving away Bitcoin, considering that they don't even accept Bitcoin. But apparently that's their ploy. They're using this as a tool to explore who's actually interested in paying in cryptocurrency. Apparently, if you make payments using Cash App, then you will receive 15% back in Bitcoin as a reward for your purchase. The idea is to test whether customers are interested in more cryptocurrency options. They said that if they just started accepting crypto right now, the kiosk, it would have very low adoption. So there's definitely cost-benefit analysis for them and thinking, do we invest our resources in training up all of our staff for that one person, Naomi Brockwell, who comes in and spends crypto to buy a burger? They're probably going to decide no. And so they're just testing things out, see if this could spark some interest. People love free money, and so this is a way for people to dive in and test the waters with crypto, maybe even get some crypto that they can potentially spend down the road at Shake Shack. I was about to say Shapeshift, and that's because I got Michael Perklin coming on the show. Everything, all my words are all mumble there. So it's kind of interesting. I really like seeing these rewards programs. We've seen them being pretty successful in other areas because people like to get these little bits of rewards when they're spending, and I personally love seeing people spend their crypto. So if this leads them towards accepting crypto and people can start spending it in their everyday life, I think that's awesome. Something that's not so awesome. Let's go to our next topic. We have Iranians who are banned from OpenSea. Oh my gosh. So OpenSea users with Iran-based IP addresses are claiming that their accounts were terminated on Thursday. A spokesperson from OpenSea said that OpenSea blocks users and territories in the US sanctions list from using our services, including buying, selling, and transferring NFTs on OpenSea. The US sanctions in questions are against the Iranian government, which prevents US companies from providing goods or service to any user based in Iran. And we've seen so many sanctions at the moment. We have blacklisted addresses for people who had anything to do with the Canadian trucker convoy. We see people in Russia being blacklisted from everything. Last year, Ethereum, Consensus, they had this group together where they were giving scholarships to Iranian coders, like female coders, to help educate them, and they were all shut off and banned from completing their educational program because of sanctions. This whole thing, I mean, that story made me so sad. That happened in November last year, and the people who were participating in this program, there were 50 students. They were told, you are located in a country that we are prohibited from providing goods or services to under US law, the firm's Consensus Academy told them, which is just absolutely devastating. So these students lost access to course materials just a few weeks before the program's scheduled ending. They didn't get their completion certificate. It's so heartbreaking to see this because you have people over the other side of the world in a really bad situation with a terrible government who are trying to pull themselves out of this situation to learn a new skill set. They're born into a situation that they had no control over. They have a terrible dictator who's running the country, driving into the dust, and they're just trying to build a skill set to enable them to interact with the global economy and change their lot in life. And then you have governments coming around, turning around and saying, nope, you can't. Like sanctions, it needs to be said over and over. Sanctions hurt mainly innocent people in these countries because governments are trying to punish the dictators of those countries. And it's really, really sad to see this sort of stuff happen. I think the idea behind this is that, well, if you put enough pressure on the government and the people will rise up and they will overthrow that government or they'll push back against it. I mean, you have to realize in these countries, if people rise up or they voice their dissent, the government doesn't care in these countries to start off with. And second of all, they're probably going to be killed in a lot of these places, right? So, no, you don't want to encourage these people to just start rising up. It's a really difficult situation that they're in, and it's so tragic to see so many people cut off from tools that could empower them, could lead to, emancipation, to freedom from a terrible situation, and especially blockchain tools, right? You have these courses that are educating people, they're learning about blockchain technology. These are the tools that could actually empower these people to, build things, freedom-enabling tools that could disempower the government. And maybe get rid of these dictators, give them financial freedom, give them alternatives in life, take their money out of things that are controlled by their government. So it's just really sad to see see all these things happening. It really breaks my heart. And sanctions rules are also very convoluted. Apparently, like, education is not normally subject to sanctions rules, but if it's like live education, then it is. And it, like, if you ask OFAC, or if you ask any of the bureaucracies in charge of these regulations, like, so what is and isn't sanctioned, you're never going to get a clear answer. It's really difficult. And so a lot of companies will deliberately just not offer services to these people because they will face significant monetary penalties. They'll even face criminal charges a lot of the time. So just a really, really sad situation. But just before I go on to the next story on that note, I mean, you have people calling for mass bans of Russian people. Again, we've talked about this on the show before. I've talked about this on the hash. It's really sad to see the people of a country get persecuted for the actions of their government, right? Because you see thousands of people in Russia who are actually protesting the war, and the people who are fighting the war, they're all conscripted as well. So all of these bans are like, let's cut off all these Russians and let's vilify an entire population. Not on board with that. I'm glad to see that Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, is also not on board. He said people deserve access to basic financial services. They said that they would comply with the sanctions request to block off customers in Russia from Coinbase if the US government decided to impose such restrictions, but they're not going to preemptively do it. And he said some ordinary Russians are using crypto as a lifeline now that their currency has collapsed. Many of them likely oppose what their country is doing, and a ban would hurt them too. Just great things to keep in mind as we're kind of surrounded by a lot of propaganda and very charged sentiments in a very, very sad, tragic situation right now. So, crypto's also been a lifeline, not just for Russians, but people in the Ukraine. So another thing that I will mention is that Ukraine has raised over 55 million in crypto, a bunch of different cryptos as well. Apparently you've got Dogecoin and Polkadot as well. I also saw Jocelyn Sun in there saying like, I'll give you some Tron. Like, everyone's piling in, but the net result of that is that Ukrainian people are getting a whole bunch of money. I wish all of that money were going directly to the Ukrainian people. I don't really like to see the governments being the ones who collect all of that money, but I'm glad to see that the Ukrainian people are also getting help. And crypto's enabled that. It's pretty cool. And I did see a meme. I wish that I'd prepped this meme. I'm sorry, Sam, my producer. I should have given it to you. That was this hilarious meme of Peter Schiff in like a boat filled with gold bars saying like, I'm gonna go and help the Ukrainian people. And it just kind of brings home the point, like how much easier it is to transfer crypto over the other side of the world, how much more utility it has, and like these gold bars that a lot of people are hanging on to as, the only true source of financial freedom. It's not. Crypto is pretty great too. So on that note, let's talk about some other sanctions, some hiccups that happened, and some uproar that it created in the crypto Twitter community. So MetaMask, which is the gateway to many people's interaction with Ethereum, it was apparently made inaccessible to users in Venezuela. Turns out it wasn't MetaMask that was actually made unavailable. MetaMask actually relies on Infura, the infrastructure service, in order to access the Ethereum blockchain. And Infura had imposed new geo-blocks. This happened on Thursday. And apparently they applied them too broadly. So they put out this tweet. We'll pull that up here. And keep in mind, whenever we post tweets on Twitter, feel free to respond to us. We may pull your comments and have them here on the show, and we'll discuss them. But this was a comment from Infura. So they said, in response to the concerns we have been hearing, we want everyone to know that we corrected the problem that so many of you pointed out. In changing some configurations as a result of the new sanctions directives from the United States and other jurisdictions, we mistakenly configured the settings more broadly than they needed to be. This was our oversight. We are grateful that it was pointed out to us. Once we determined what happened, we are able to fix the problem. Service has been restored. We sincerely apologize, all of that stuff. But meanwhile, the consequence of this is people saying, wait, you can block off access to Ethereum to an entire country? Like, doesn't this raise alarm bells? A lot of people are saying, like, doesn't this mean that Ethereum is too centralized? And Moxie Marlinspike, former CEO of Signal, actually wrote this article that says most people interact with Ethereum through one of two services, either Infura or Alchemy. So the fact that everyone's kind of relying on these central places, like, what does that say about the ecosystem? But I'm absolutely delighted to have someone on the show, one of my favorite people and an expert in this field, Michael Perklin, who's going to dive into the nuances of this, because it's not simply a question of whether Ethereum is too centralized. You know, there are a lot of components to unpack here. So Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Naomi.
Yeah, so let's start off. Yeah, talk to me about what Infura and Alchemy do, why they've become the central point of the Ethereum ecosystem.
Great question. First, I want to start off by saying Ethereum is not too centralized. Now, every company that deals with various blockchains, they need to get the data from somewhere. And usually they'll have their own staff that will pull together all the servers and get all the data hosted. That takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. And these servers, to keep them running, cost a lot of money. So invariably, what companies do to start cutting down costs is outsourcing it to more centralized service providers like Infura and others. And just like any other centralized service, it is up to whoever is controlling that service to decide who can and cannot use their service, or who they will and will not allow to connect to it. Just like you could choose, Naomi, to stop broadcasting to Australia if you decided. I know you wouldn't, but whoever is controlling the server gets to decide who gets to access it. And Infura may have limited access to their servers, but it's important to note that because Ethereum is open and anybody's able to run their own servers, you don't have to rely on Infura. You don't have to rely on any individual server. You always have the opportunity to run your own.
Yeah, and this is something that actually Jez brought up in a response on Twitter. He said, MetaMask uses Infura by default, but with a setting change, you can use any other node, including your own node. Always best to change it anyways, as transactions can send much faster. But I mean, my immediate question that comes up is, if it's so easy to run these nodes, why is everyone relying on two different servers?
It all comes down to cost. While it is fairly easy for an IT-inclined person to run their own copy of the Ethereum blockchain, as they continue to run it, it will cost more money. Now, if they have it on one of their own computers in their own home, that's great for their own home use. But if they're also running a web service that millions have access to, they can't talk to a node inside someone's home. They also need to be hosted in a cloud. When Shapeshift ran 14 different blockchains as a centralized company, we would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars every month just to keep them all online and in sync. And invariably, one will fall out of sync, and an engineer will be tasked with fixing that one node and keeping it online. There's a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money involved in keeping these nodes online and healthy.
Yeah, it's interesting because the barriers are not necessary. I mean, the barriers are monetary, is essentially what you're saying. There are these cost barriers, but like, how do we solve that issue? Because that's still a barrier that is creating these centralized focal points. And Ethereum is not centralized, as you said. But if like we're still relying on these centralized services in order to access it, how do we kind of break that apart? Like, what's the solution here?
Great question. One of the easiest solutions is for your IT-inclined audience members, if they are able to tinker with their MetaMask settings and point it to a node that they run themselves, they will never be subject to the decisions by a centralized service, because the centralized service they're connecting to is their own. They choose. Shapeshift actually ran into this problem when we decided to shut down our company last year. In the same way that you were talking about sanctions for different countries and things like that, it is the companies that find themselves in uncomfortable positions where they have to enforce laws that they may or may not agree with. Shapeshift realized last year that the best way to serve our customers is actually to remove Shapeshift itself from the equation. And in doing so, we started open sourcing all of our software and building on more open protocols. And we ran into a very similar problem ourselves. How are we going to be able to give access to all this blockchain data that every Shapeshift user needs when the Shapeshift corporation is no longer existent, and all these centralized servers that we paid our staff to maintain will be shut down? And one of the solutions that we've settled on is something that we call Foxchain. It's a new blockchain that's being built by Shapeshift engineers that is designed with a single purpose. and that is to remove any central point of failure from people's access to their own crypto assets. Whether your crypto asset of choice is Bitcoin or Ethereum or Litecoin or whatever it is that you like, through the Fox Chain service, you'll be able to get all the data you need about your Litecoin holdings, so you can send your Litecoin whenever you need, or your Bitcoin or your Ethereum. And in this way, we remove ourselves from being a single point of failure and empower every Shapeshift user to talk to each other to get the data they need from each other instead.
Yeah, and what Shapeshift did, I just have to call it out, and I don't think I ever introduced you, I guess because Shapeshift has decentralized, so you're no longer part of it, so I don't have that, like Michael Perklin of Shapeshift, but you were the CTO, right, of Shapeshift. That was your official title?
I was the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer.
CISO, yeah. And I just want to give a shout out to what Shapeshift did, which was awesome. So you have this centralized, well, first of all, you have this company in the crypto space and they're like, hey, we're breaking down barriers and offering this really cool service. And everyone's like, yay, you're my favorite platform. And then the government comes in and says, don't you do that, because we don't want people to have access to these financial tools. So they impose all these restrictions, and Shapeshift fought it, obviously, and fought it for years, I might add. And Eric was just so awesome and outspoken through that whole process. Eric Voorhees, the CEO, for anyone wondering. And then it finally got to a stage where you guys are like, listen, if we have to comply with all of these US regulations, we're basically shutting down the service that people first came to us for, that people first found valuable. And if we want to actually provide value to our consumers, we can't have this central entity that can be regulated, you know, because when you have a central company, when you have a central CEO, when you have a central server that can be unplugged, these are all focal points that the government can target and did target in your case. And so you guys went, all right, we're just going to dissolve the company. We're going to become a DAO. You were the first company I know of that actually like willingly gave up their money transmitter licenses. Most people spend like their entire, company's lifetime trying to get a money transmitter license. It's this coveted thing. You guys were like, yeah, nah, we don't want one anymore. We're just going to dissolve our company, allow anyone to have access to these services. And that's exactly what you did. So now it's a decentralized platform. And then Fox Chain is now going to become a further decentralized part of all of this, so that there are no central servers, doing this. There's actually a decentralized server infrastructure run by Shapeshift users. That's epic. Like, well done to the Shapeshift team. I think that's so cool. Like, what was all of that experience like?
Honestly, it was quite surreal. Time and time again, we would be forced to do something that we need to do as a company in the space, just like many other companies in the space are equally forced to do these things. And at one point, we realized that when you're looking at all the different DAOs that are out there, they are innovating so much more quickly. They are shipping new features so much more quickly. And they don't have all the same regulatory friction that centralized companies like ourselves did at the time. And we realized that the only way that we could even stay competitive is if we just dissolved ourselves. And it was quite a difficult experience trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to message this even to our own staff before we even start messaging this beyond our staff and to the wider world? Because the first thing that any employee would hear is, oh, I'm being fired, which is true. However, the way that all the employees were packaged out and the way that they were taken care of meant that they could continue contributing to work on Shapeshift, even though they no longer worked for Shapeshift. And today, I no longer have a title at the Shapeshift DAO. I'm just a DAO member, like Eric, our former CEO, and many of the other employees who I love to work alongside.
That's really, really cool. I'm interested in the comments if anyone here was a prior Shapeshift user, if they've tested out the decentralized platform. I know that you were integrating with ThorChain. I mentioned ThorChain earlier in the show as kind of like a back end, as like you guys are kind of like this aggregator now, a front end for using the world of DeFi, and ThorChain is one of the tools under the hood where people can just swap without any intermediary. It's interesting. I think a lot of people use Shapeshift now and don't realize that it's no longer a company doing it all. It's literally this decentralized entity, just aggregating all these decentralized entities on the back end as well. Like, I mean, that's pretty cool. Like, let me know in the comments if you guys have tried out Shapeshift. I remember the first time that I did after you guys become decentralized, and I'm using Thorchain and all that. It feels really good to move your money and know that there's no intermediary in there. So very interested if other people have had the same situation. But do you think that this is a trend? Do you think that we're going to see more pressure? Like, the more regulatory clampdown there is, the more the SEC tries to shut down innovation, the more that other government bureaucracies try to shut down innovation. Are we going to see this trend towards companies just taking themselves out of the picture and decentralizing in this way as well?
I actually do think this is going to be a trend. One thing that the war in the Ukraine has shown is that there's a renewed focus on who controls money. For decades, we were happy to use money just as it was without really thinking about it. But now, whether it is people funding the Ukraine or Russia using it to evade American sanctions, the free and open movement of money is quickly becoming center stage. And I'm already aware of a number of companies that have already pledged to decentralize and to follow in Shapeshift's footsteps in becoming a DAO. This trend of open work without centralized employers and open money without centralized points of failure like banks, I think is going to become the norm.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. I think that there's just the pressure is leading people that way. If you erect too many barriers and you make it too difficult for people to provide the valuable services that they want to provide to consumers, then it's just going to push them in other directions. And it's funny, Amir Taki talked about this bifurcation of the crypto world, where you're going to end up with RegFi, you're going to end up with DarkFi. You know, this idea that half of the space is going to be really regulated, and it's going to be toothless. You're not going to be able to do anything, and it's just literally going to mimic the existing financial infrastructure, in which case, why do we even need it? We've got the existing financial infrastructure. Or you're going to use this world that is DeFi, which is, has no barriers to entry, which is permissionless. And it's very interesting to see how the next decade is going to look, for sure. So talk to me, as we kind of, yeah, absolutely. As we kind of start to wrap up here, just as a TLDR for people, just lay out the situation with Ethereum. So Ethereum, not too centralized. And what's your reasoning behind that? And which parts of it are too centralized? And what can we do to change that?
Absolutely. So there are thousands of Ethereum servers online today, each of them hosting the full copy of the Ethereum blockchain. And while it's possible for many users to connect into any of these thousands, the reality is that developers take shortcuts. I'm hosting my stuff on Amazon AWS, or I'm hosting my stuff on Google Cloud, and it's just easier to put in a reference to Infura, and my app runs and my users can now use it. And that's all well and good until there is some kind of an issue with Infura, whether it be a misconfiguration of regulatory controls or just a technical glitch. That rolls downstream to everybody who ends up using Infura. I would definitely agree with Moxie Marlinspike, where he was critical that too many developers are choosing to run their systems on Infura's backend. I agree that there's too much of a focus on these centralized services. They work great and they make a developer's job easy, but they also put too many applications in the hands of one service provider. And that's one of the reasons why Shapeshift embarked on this Foxchain program. Once Foxchain exists, yes, Shapeshift will be able to use decentralized Ethereum servers and Bitcoin servers and Thorchain servers, but also every single one of your listeners will be able to use it just the same. Shapeshift will just be one client of many. And any developer, rather than spinning up their own server in their dorm room, where they may not have room for, or spinning up an instance in Infura, which they may not have money for, any developer will be able to hook right into an existing Foxchain instance, find an online Ethereum node, and program away. And if that one node disappears for whatever reason, they can just consult Foxchain again to find yet another one. Foxchain will act like a phone book or an online directory of all online and active blockchain nodes that they can connect to get whatever data they need for their users.
Yeah, and let's break that down a little bit further. So some people in the chat were confused. They were like, is Foxchain and Thorchain and what are we're talking about Shapeshift? Like, how does this all interact? So to be
I
clear,
can put it together.
Shapeshift, it's a DAO. It used to be a company. They decentralized. It became a DAO. They realized that there's still some centralized parts of like the underlying infrastructure, namely like who runs the servers. So then they created Foxchain, which is like a decentralized network of servers. So you no longer need to rely on centralized companies like Infura or Alchemy or even
Well, we're
Shapeshift
still
servers
creating Foxchain.
themselves.
It doesn't exist yet,
Still
but that
creating
is the dream of it. Yes.
that is the dream. So the idea is to decentralize that part of it, which is a very heavily centralized part of the crypto world right now, because a lot of people just go straight to Infura or Alchemy when dealing with Ethereum blockchain. So Foxchain will be this decentralized network of servers. Meanwhile, Thorchain is a DEX. Thorchain is a cross-chain DEX, which means that you can swap assets between different chains. So, I mean, it's just so cool to see all of these different iterations of decentralization popping up that blockchain technology has enabled. I love it. I'm just watching it because, like, there's so many centralized parts of life. Sometimes centralization is great. Sometimes it's not because it's easily controlled. And we're starting to see like, decentralized file storage. You no longer need to rely on AWS. We've got like Filecoin, for example. We've got decentralized exchanges. So you no longer need to rely on Binance, for example. You can go to something like Thorchain. We're going to have decentralized server infrastructure. So you can use something like Foxchain rather than using something like Infura. Like, it's just really cool to see us find these problems, say, okay, that's a weakness, that is a vulnerability in a system that could be targeted and shut down. Let's find a way to make it more robust and redundant and decentralize it. And we're doing it. And you've got really smart people who are all just piling into this ethos. Like, when did this ethos come about that people were like, yeah, decentralization is a goal and
It was all
empowerment of the people is
Satoshi.
a goal? Oh my God, Satoshi was awesome, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Hats
Satoshi
off.
made the
Let's all
very
just hats
first
off.
decentralized coin. Following that, we've got now decentralized exchanges like Thorchain, but we're all still using centralized interfaces. Your wallet provider that publishes it on the app store or on a website, those can still be taken down. And that's Shapeshift's mission, to decentralize the user interface so that we can use decentralized exchanges to trade our decentralized coins.
Yeah. So I've got a comment here. So Jonathan Hale says, to be honest, it's okay to have the majority of Ethereum nodes in Infura most of the time. The essential issue is that the switching costs are extremely low, so there is no lock into Infura. Walk me through what that means, and like switching costs and why that's an issue.
Well, I'm not sure what that commenter meant by switching costs, but I would actually disagree with his assertion that it's okay for the majority of Ethereum nodes to all be controlled by one entity, whether it's Infura or AWS or any entity. The importance of decentralization is that when one company or one server or one thing has a problem, the rest continue to operate unhindered. And if you have too many under one bucket, no matter what the bucket is, even if it's too many under Shapeshift, that's not good for the world.
Yeah, so his comment there, I'll just add that comment and maybe we could bring it up on screen. He said the idea behind that is so that the network can decentralize rapidly when necessary, but optimize for cost when not under attack. Because there is always this trade-off. You've got cost and you've got robustness and censorship resistance. And I mean, right now, I think the censorship resistance is a really top priority for a lot of people, given that we've seen crackdowns increasing from government. So it has really started to become this, top priority for people. But cost also needs to be a priority, because if you sustain your business, it's going to shut down. So he said, that this would be a way to have the infrastructure in place so that you can decentralize when you need to, but then optimize for cost when not under attack. Are we under attack? Aren't we just constantly under attack, though? Should we presume we're always under attack?
Well, if you believe in privacy, like I know that you do, Naomi, our privacy is always under attack. And the centralization of these decentralized technologies, I would classify as an ongoing attack that is removing the power from our hands and placing it into the hands of very few people. The more that we follow Satoshi's lead in decentralizing assets, in building these decentralized exchange protocols, and building these decentralized interfaces so that it is impossible for any country or any regime or any man or woman or child to shut down anyone's access to the money that they rightfully earned themselves. This is why I'm on this mission with the Shapeshift DAO, and why I'm happy to continue on this mission alongside people like yourself, Naomi, who believe that individuals' ability to transact should never be stifled.
Absolutely. So we're going to go, as we wrap up here, to a YouTube comment. We have a comment from Mr. Cartmill who says, do you think Ethereum is being investigated because of Russia ties and the war, with all the news around them? So I think that, honestly, all of the propaganda that we've seen about crypto being this enabler for bad people is absolutely going to be leveraged as a reason to crack down on the regulatory front. I don't know if you agree with that, Michael.
I do.
Yeah.
If anything, I think it'll become one of the central issues over the next few months, as the U.S. has now sanctioned Russia, and they observe Russia avoiding sanctions by using things like cryptocurrencies. There will be a renewed interest in cracking down on anybody who uses cryptocurrencies, and I see it as being a very large battle that'll take place in the United States between their First Amendment of freedom of speech and freedom to transact, with the desire of the current regime to sanction some foreign government. I'm fascinated to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to wrap it up there. Michael, it's been so great to have you here. You're always such a wealth of knowledge, one of my favorite people, and the Shapeshift team and all your work with that decentralization and paving the way and being this trailblazer to show what's possible in this new crypto era has just been remarkable. So thank you so much for your time and expertise. We hope to have you back.
Thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely.
Right.
So everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll go back to those super chats that we got, because I really appreciate you guys being here and supporting the channel. But make sure that you do hit the like button, hit the subscribe button before you guys go, because it's really important for us and helps bump us in the YouTube algorithm. We get hidden by YouTube, so it's really helpful for us to get your support in that way. Let's bring back those super chats, not the normal chats, if we can, just because I want to give a hat tip to the people who support the channel. The first one's Cypher RK, so he said, hey you sticker, which was really awesome, and then the next one was from IT saying, hey yourself. So that was awesome. Thank you guys so much, and that wraps up our show. We come to you live every Thursday at 4 p.m. on the channel for Privacy Beat, where we talk about all of the latest news in privacy and give you tips for things that you can do to protect your privacy. And then we also have our live show on Fridays at 4 p.m. Crypto Beat, where we talk about all of the latest crypto news, everything you need to know in the crypto space. Appreciate you. Go have a wonderful weekend, and we will catch you soon. Bye.
To the Agora's nexus, we need the whole community connected. We're the alternative collective.